Friday, June 13th, 2026, 1 p.m. The phone rang. It was the Trump administration, and the message was simple: shut down access to your newest AI models. Deadline 90 minutes. By 5:21 p.m., the US Commerce Department had issued a formal export control directive requiring Anthropic to cut off access to its two most advanced models for any foreign national, anywhere on Earth. Not just customers, not just competitors, their own employees who weren't US citizens. This is the story of what happened, why it happened, and why it changes everything for anyone building with AI outside America. To understand what was lost, you need to understand what Fable 5 actually was. On June 9th, Anthropic announced Claude Fable 5. This was the first broadly available model in what they call the Mythos class. And here's the thing that makes this whole story ironic. Anthropic itself had spent months telling anyone who would listen that Mythos was too dangerous to release publicly. Fable 5 was built on the same underlying architecture as the even more powerful Claude Mythos 5. The difference was that Fable 5 had classifier-based safeguards designed to block queries in three high-risk areas: cybersecurity, biology, and chemistry. If you asked it something in those domains, it would fall back to the weaker Claude Opus 4.8 instead. But here's what's impressive. In testing, 95% of Fable 5 sessions ran entirely on the model without needing that fallback. The model showed exceptional performance in software engineering, knowledge work, and vision, and its lead over competing models grew as tasks got more complex. External red teams had spent over 1,000 hours trying to jailbreak it. They found no universal exploits. Mythos 5, the unrestricted version, was kept inside something called Project Glasswing. Access limited to select government agencies and companies. That detail matters later. Now, here's where the timeline gets tight. This all happened in 4 days, and this is where the first cracks appear. The reason Microsoft blocked it internally tells you a lot about the tension these models create. Anthropic's new safety system required storing every prompt and output for 30 days. If something got flagged, up to 2 years. They needed that data to operate their safety classifiers. Microsoft's internal policy was zero data retention. Their legal teams went into a spin, trying to figure out whether their own employees could use a Microsoft partner product on Microsoft's own infrastructure. That should have been a warning sign. Wednesday, June 11th, the guardrail controversy hits. The system card revealed that Anthropic had been stealthily degrading responses they suspected were distillation attempts, and they did it without telling users. No notification, just silently giving you worse answers if they thought you were trying to copy the model. The backlash was immediate. Anthropic reversed course and said distillation queries would now fall back to Opus 4.8 with a visible notification. You will see this every time it happens. But the damage was done, trust was eroding, and the political machinery was already moving. Friday, June 13th, 1 p.m. Eastern, the Trump administration calls Anthropic 90-minute ultimatum. The company spent the weekend in Washington, D.C. trying to convince the administration that Fable 5 was not the existential threat they believed it was. But the irony here is brutal. Anthropic's own months-long warnings about Mythos being too dangerous were now being used as evidence against them. Based on reporting from The Verge, Ars Technica, Semaphore, and official statements, the administration's decision was driven by 5 converging factors. Here they are. The primary stated reason was a jailbreak report. The Commerce Department was concerned that someone had found a way to bypass Fable 5's classifier-based safeguards in cybersecurity, chemistry, and biology. 3 domains where even a capable model could help construct weapons or orchestrate cyber attacks. But here's where it gets contested. Anthropic said the government provided only verbal evidence of what they called a potential narrow, non-universal jailbreak. The vulnerabilities found were minor and relatively simple software flaws, and other publicly available models, including GPT 5.5, had similar capabilities. One former Commerce Department official even speculated to the Wall Street Journal that the White House's pre-existing tensions with Anthropic may have influenced the decision.
Reason 2. The China question. Semaphore reported that the White House's decision was driven in part by fears that a China-linked group had accessed Mythos 5. If true, the Chinese government could attempt to reverse engineer the model through distillation, training a cheaper student AI on the outputs of a frontier model. But again, this is contested. Anthropic told Semaphore the government did not bring up China during their discussions. David Sachs, Trump's AI advisor, focused on the jailbreak concerns in his public statements. He didn't mention China, and the White House never confirmed the Access report. So was it about China? Possibly, but the evidence is thin. Reason 3. A Discord group had reportedly accessed Mythos for 2 weeks before Anthropic discovered the breach and shut it down. This highlighted just how hard it is to maintain exclusive access to a frontier model in practice. If a Discord group can get in, what's stopping a state actor? Reason 4. Anthropic's own warnings backfired spectacularly. They had spent months telling the world that Mythos was too dangerous for public release. When a report suggested Fable 5's guardrails had failed, the administration treated that as confirmation of Anthropic's own fears. As The Verge's Hayden Field put it, Anthropic's dire warnings about Mythos falling into the wrong hands came back to haunt it. If you're building an AI company, this is a strategic lesson. Be careful what you warn about. Someone might take you seriously. And reason 5. The administration claimed it needed time to harden the national security apparatus against the threats these models posed. They said this could be done in a few weeks. A pause, not a permanent ban. But once you've shut down a product globally, hitting resume is not that simple. Customers move on. Trust evaporates. The momentum is gone. Now let's talk about what this actually means in practice, because the scope of this ban is unlike anything we've seen before. This is not a regional block. It is nationality-based. If you are not a US citizen, you cannot access Fable 5 or Mythos 5. Not in Europe, not in Asia. Not even if you're sitting in San Francisco working for Anthropic. Non-US researchers at the company were locked out of their own product. Let that sink in for a second. The international reaction was swift. In the UK, AI Minister Kanishka Narayan framed it as a sovereignty crisis. His quote is worth hearing in full. "We treat every other threat to our sovereignty with deadly seriousness, but we haven't learned to treat this one in the same way." He called AI the central political question of our time. Britain must decide how AI shapes its economy and security before someone else decides for them. France's reaction was reportedly more explicit and more forceful in naming the US directly. The message was clear. If America can unilaterally cut off access to the world's most advanced AI, Europe cannot afford to rely on American infrastructure. And this is the emerging consensus. As The Verge's Robert Hart wrote, the shutdown gave new force to long-running arguments against relying on the US for critical technologies. Abroad, the incident offered a sobering reminder that the US not only dominates frontier AI, its government also wields power over who gets to use it. Now here's where analysis becomes prophecy. The Fable ban is not an isolated incident, it's a precedent. And here's what it signals for the trajectory of AI and agents globally. First, the sovereign AI race just accelerated massively. Every non-US nation with AI ambitions will read this story and draw the same conclusion. You cannot build a national AI strategy on rented American infrastructure. Expect a wave of government-funded compute projects, sovereign LLM initiatives, and new regulations designed to protect domestic AI from extraterritorial US controls. The EU AI Act now has sharper teeth. Non-US AI conferences and research networks just became strategically important. The question has shifted from should we build our own models to how fast can we? Second, and this is the one that matters most to the people watching this video. If you're building AI agents that depend on frontier models, the Fable ban introduces a terrifying variable. Autonomous coding agents, security analysis agents, research agents, business process automation. Every one of these depends on access to the best models, and that access can now be revoked with 90 minutes notice based on political calculations you cannot predict or influence. This changes how you need to think about your architecture. Agent platforms will need to support multi-model, multi-provider fallback as a core requirement, not a nice-to-have. Model diversity becomes a security concern, not just a performance optimization. Local models like Llama, Qwen, and DeepSeek will see accelerated investment because they are the only truly sovereign option. and agent orchestration layers will increasingly abstract away model providers entirely, making swap-in and swap-out a first-class feature. Third, the open source insurance policy just got priced in. Llama, Mistral, Qwen, DeepSeek, and the broader open-weight ecosystem now serve as insurance against unilateral US export controls. Governments that were ambivalent about open source AI will pour resources into it, because a model you can run on your own hardware cannot be turned off by a foreign government. We're going to see a surge in government-funded open-weight training, hardware subsidy programs for domestic compute, and international coalitions for open AI development. Here's the paradox. The Fable ban harms US AI companies most. Anthropic loses revenue, credibility, and research talent. Why would a top AI researcher from Europe or Asia join a company where they can be locked out of their own work? Meanwhile, non-US AI companies get an enormous accelerant. Capital, talent, and government support are all flowing into sovereign AI development. The US may have won a short-term national security battle while losing the long-term economic war for AI dominance. And one last dimension that's flying under the radar. Anyone who used Fable 5 before the ban had their interactions retained for 30 days under Anthropic's data policy. This means Anthropic now holds a dataset of international usage that the US government could potentially access. For privacy-conscious nations and enterprises, this is yet another argument for sovereign AI infrastructure. The Fable ban is the shot heard round the AI world. It demonstrates that the US government can and will unilaterally cut off access to frontier AI models for the entire non-US world, based on intelligence that may be questionable, on timelines measured in hours, with no appeals process. For Anthropic, it's a commercial and reputational disaster. For the US AI industry, it's a self-inflicted wound. For the rest of the world, it's the final proof that sovereign AI capability is not a luxury. It's a necessity. And for anyone building AI agents, it's a wake-up call. The layer between your agents and their models is now a geopolitical fault line. Build accordingly. If this kind of analysis is useful to you, we've put together a free course that walks through 3 practical AI setups: competitor research, difficult emails, background briefings. No hype, no tool chasing, just a clear starting point. Link in the description. And thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.